G'day, I'm Paul. Have you got a tent in the garage that you've never used? Or in my case, it's goggles because I was going to take up swimming and never did, clearly. That's kind of what this is. It's the tent in the garage, the goggles in the drawer. It's an off-roader that is built to go anywhere, but generally you'll see them in the city because they're versatile as a 7-seater. Is that a bad thing? Well, let's go through it today in a detailed review. This is the Pajero Sport GLS. It kicks off from a little over $51,000 and you pay an extra $1,000 for a 7-seat configuration. It's built for adventuring and off-roading, but also for carrying the kids and towing. It competes with cars like the Ford Everest, the Toyota Fortuner, and the Isuzu MU-X. And what we're going to do today is look at it from a day-to-day point of view. We're not going to go off-roading or do any towing. This is simply going to be a detailed review of this car in and around the city and what you're going to be using it for with the family. Now, if you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this review, you can use the time codes up there, or if you're on YouTube, just scroll down to the description where you'll see the links to jump ahead. If you haven't done so already, I'd love it if you could hit the subscribe button and also the bell icon. That's going to tell you every single time we drive something new. Let's talk exterior. So you've got 7 colors to choose from, and all but the flat white is about $1,000 extra, which is a lot for paint. I don't know, maybe there's more paint to throw on this car. I like the styling of this. So Mitsubishi has just given this a minor facelift. They've given this a similar front end to the new Triton, and I think it looks really good. You've got LED headlights with that LED running light. Kind of looks like diamonds in there. Girl's best friend. What about the specs of this for off-roading? You're virtually going to be able to go anywhere with this, and we'll go into a bit more detail about the off-roading equipment. But in terms of the specifications, we're talking 700 millimeters of wading depth. That's the point at which you're going to start hitting your first electronics and things that are going to be ruined by water. On top of that, you've got a 30-degree approach angle. That's the angle of the face that you can approach with the front of the car before hitting anything. The rear is a 24.2-degree departure angle, and then you have 218 millimeters of ground clearance. And it's quite a confident-looking front end. It doesn't look cheesy. The chrome really gives this a premium look, and I think everything about this screams adventure and utilitarian. Now, have a look at the side here. 18-inch alloy wheels. You don't have the flared wheel arches here and the plastic guards that you find on smaller SUVs. I think it's fairly evident enough that this is a big SUV that's going to go anywhere. You've got chrome on the mirrors. You get privacy glass, but come around to the back. This is where it kind of stops working for me. As part of the facelift, they fixed these tail lights by shrinking them a little bit, but they still look like they're melted. It's like this was the tail light. It then was burned and then it melted down here. They have added these LED bits with a diffused look to make it a bit more premium, but I don't know, I think this looks a little unresolved and they kind of need a little bit of work on it. Down here, you've got the tow package. So this car comes with a 3,100 kilo braked towing capacity. So that's the amount you can tow with a brake trailer. It comes with a 310 kilogram downbore weight. That's the amount of weight you can put down on the tow bar. Keep in mind that some SUVs don't actually have that capacity. So you want to be aiming for the 10% mark. If you've got 3,100 kilos of towing capacity, you want 10% of that as your downbore weight. Without that, you're not really going to have a safe towing load at the back here. Let's talk interior. The Pajero Sport is based on the Triton dual cab ute. Normally what that means is they make it a wagon, leave the same interior, and it's cheap and nasty inside and they charge you more for it. This time around though, Mitsubishi's done a great job with the Pajero Sport because yes, it is based on a Triton, but the interior actually looks premium and nice. It doesn't feel like you're just driving a ute with 7 seats. So how nice is it? We have our durometer here. This tests our hardness from 0 to 100, where 0 is very soft and 100 is very hard. That dashboard looks nice and soft. We'll give that a shot. Oh, wow, not quite. Okay, so that's almost maxed out our meter. Yeah, that's actually really nice and firm. We'll see what this is like. That feels really soft. There you go. They're almost polar opposites. That's in the 20s. The dashboard's almost 100. So hard, soft, doors are okay. So yeah, okay, it is a little utilitarian. There are some hard parts around, but it still looks okay. What about build quality though? Let's see how this all feels. That is incredibly loose. In fact, that whole center console is kind of loose. Yeah, look, it's okay. It's not bad, but yeah, it could be a little bit tighter around the edges here. This is the compromise you have to make when they kind of just take the ute chassis and turn it into a wagon. Let's talk infotainment. As part of the Pajero Sport facelift, it also has a new infotainment system. The outgoing system was a 7-inch unit. This is now an 8-inch unit, and today I'm going to give you a detailed review. This is part of the new Alliance setup. So that is Mitsubishi, Renault, Nissan. They're part of an alliance, and as part of that, they're reducing costs by making an infotainment system that will roll out across all of their cars. Great idea, because it means you can pool your resources and make a kick-ass infotainment system. Unfortunately, they haven't done that here, so I'll walk you through what we have on display. I'll then also walk you through an application you have available in Pajero, Sport, Exceed and other Mitsubishi models as well. Start off over here with multimedia. This is where you can pick your audio source. DAB, FM, AM are the main radio sources, and then you can also select from iPod, old school, Bluetooth audio, USB video. There's a HDMI port there as well. And then you also have smartphone mirroring, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. What I don't like about the display here for the radio is if you need to scroll through this list, it's a little bit tricky to make heads or tails of it. They've got all these random characters in there. It doesn't appear to be in alphabetical order too, so it kind of just all mixes up and you need to go looking for the station that you want. And it takes a while because none of it's in order and it doesn't really make a great deal of sense. If we then jump back to the home menu and go to info, this is very basic here. It gives you version information about the infotainment system, and there's also a help screen if you need assistance connecting to the car and also using the voice control. So it just comes up here with instructions on how to use the voice control system. Now that's a problem because the voice control doesn't allow you to just speak commands at the car. So if I want to put in an address destination, for example, I'll press this.
Please speak after the beep.
And what it does is it tells me what I can and can't say. Instead of just interpreting my voice, it says, no, you need to give me everything in these certain orders. And that kind of makes it
voice control.
That kind of makes it counterintuitive because it's not just an easy spoken system. You can do a push and hold to then use the voice recognition on your smartphone. And that, of course, is a much smarter system because it uses the cloud for your voice. Speaking of which, this is what the smartphone mirroring menu looks like. This is Apple CarPlay. It works with a cable. It's not a wireless system. And there's also Android Auto, but we don't have an Android phone, so I can't show you that. Works fairly well. It's just Apple CarPlay, transitions between the screens okay. Earlier on, this was quite laggy. It seems to have sped up now over time, which is interesting. But it is good to see Apple CarPlay built in there because it doesn't actually come with satellite navigation unless you go for the top spec model. So you're going to have to use your smartphone mirroring if you need navigation. Okay, what about the phone menu? I'll disconnect Apple CarPlay. We hop into that. This is traditional Bluetooth phone pairing, so you can see your recent call history, you can dial numbers, set favorites as well. That all works perfectly normally. And then if we jump into the settings menu, this is where you'll find the rest of the settings for the car, audio, DAB, display, and your smartphone mirroring, and then an ability to reset the voice control learning because it is learning using your recognition every time you hit that button. Again, not a very good system, unfortunately. The final thing I'm going to show you here is the Mitsubishi remote control application. This is available on the Pajero, Sport, Exceed and other high-end Mitsubishi products. It allows you to remotely connect to the car using the phone application. This is just the demo screen because this car doesn't have that feature, but I wanted to show you what it looks like anyway. So you can see here you can open and close the boot from this application. You can check the vehicle status to see whether it's locked or unlocked. You can remotely lock and unlock the car from here, see what the windows are doing. You can see previous fuel consumption history. You can also find the car by flashing the headlights. And finally, you have the ability, if I go to the settings menu, to configure things like how far the tailgate opens when you press the button, how long the reservation window is there for it to be able to open and close remotely, and then further information about the device and finding your car as well on a map. So it is an okay app. It will improve over time, and it's good to see Mitsubishi getting with the program here and delivering a bit more technology in their cars. Let's talk about other features you're getting with the Pajero Sport GLS, and you get AEB, that's the technology that stops the car if you don't. It'll also detect pedestrians at city speeds. Dual zone climate control. You have a powered tailgate. You get paddle shifters on the steering wheel. They're nice and metallic as well. You're getting automatic headlights and wipers, an auto-dimming rear vision mirror, leather interior with powered seats, rear parking sensors with a reverse view camera. And I'll show you what the key looks like. Here it is here. So lock, unlock, tailgate, and then on the back you have the Mitsubishi logo, which I think is upside down. Yeah. It kind of has to be that way, which is a little bit strange. This is a proximity key, so you just keep it in your pocket, grab the door, push the button to open the car, and then you have a push button start as well. What about practicality? And we'll kick things off just by mentioning this here. Families are going to love the ability to see which kids have their seatbelts on, and that applies to all 7 seats, so very cool function there. Let's go on to storage. Where are you going to put your bottles? They fit nicely there, and there's little tabs there that hold the bottle in. And then in the door, you have plenty of storage for both bottles and other things. Phone. Let's see if that will fit up the front there. It kind of doesn't. A small phone would, but a bigger phone doesn't really fit comfortably up the front, but it does fit in that center cup holder. There is a secret cavity down here though. Have a look at that. Phone fits under there. There's also key storage as well, so that's good. There's also a spot up here for your sunnies. And then a center console here with a coin tray. And then a little bit more storage beneath. It's not the biggest center console in the world, but it'll do. And then what about the glove box? Let's have a look at that. That's pretty reasonably sized as well. One of the things I like about the Pajero Sport though is how comfortable the seats are. In a previous life at my last job, I spent a lot of time driving this, especially off-road, and I loved how good the seats felt after a long drive. They hug you in nicely, they're soft. The seating position's really good too, with quite a commanding view and a good steering wheel to hold in the hands. Let's talk second row, and I'm surprised I don't really have a great deal of knee room, and I literally have no toe room there at all. Would have thought being an SUV they would have accommodated a bit more room here, but again, throwing back to this being based on the Triton, you kind of compromise for space in a dual cab as well. So yeah, a little bit disappointing there. You can't see any air vents here, and that's because they're integrated into the roof. You also have them in the third row, and you control the fans for the third row and the second row here just using these controls up the top. So that's a good function. It means if your rear seat passengers need a bit more cooling, they can take care of it themselves. Another great function down here that you don't see very often is an actual power point. It can supply 150 watts of power, and it's just a 3-pin plug. You also have USB connectivity for 2 devices in there. We have a center armrest with 2 cup holders in this cool contraption. There we go, that fits okay in there, and I'll see if we have door storage. Yeah, there is. There's storage for a bottle plus a little bit of extra stuff on the side. Mat pockets as well, with this Velcro divider down the center behind the driver and the front passenger seat. Now there is something interesting we noticed just before. This has what I like to call a DIY seatbelt for the middle passenger. It happens when they can't really integrate a seatbelt into this split folding seat. But this one's a little bit counterintuitive. So you've got to plug it into here, and then you plug it into here, and then your center passenger sits there. But the problem is, if you then have another person in this seat, and I'll demonstrate here with an overlay of Igor in that seat, this seat belt then needs to come across them, and then your seat belt. It is just a very poorly designed and counterintuitive system. Anyway, you also have ISOFIX points there if you do want to have kids here in the second row, and then top tether points for all seats in the second row. Okay, let's have a look at the third row, but before I do, look at this thing. Meaty grab handle, good for off-roading and also good for sturdy people pulling themselves out of the car. So getting into the third row is pretty straightforward. It's a 60-40 split folding seat with the 60 side on the passenger side. And watch this, that rolls down and then tumbles forward. This isn't really an area for adults, so keep that in mind. It's mainly a kids only zone, despite the fact this car is so big, but we'll see what it's like for an adult to get in. Okay, so I'm in, but let's see what happens now here if I drop this down. I have no way of pulling that forward. Eagle, could you just do that stuff for me? All right, so there you go. Look, it's not terrible. I think this is mainly a kid-only zone, but you can see here I've got okay knee room. I don't have any toe room at all, but for short journeys, this is going to be fine for an adult. It's worth keeping in mind as well, you have air vents here that are controlled by that thing right there. You've also got 2 cup holders too. So yeah, look, it is a usable space and good emergency space if you're ever a designated driver. Let's talk cargo capacity. The biggest issue with these ute-based SUVs is that you don't really get the boot room you'd expect behind the third row. You've only got around 130 litres of cargo capacity there. That's clearly not going to fit my suitcase, but it fits a little bit of shopping and a laptop bag. But the good thing is you can retract that third row. I'll show you that in just a second. But under here, you have a storage area for valuables so they can't be seen from outside. And then the spare tyre is a full-size spare, but it lives under the car. You drop it down using this little gadget here. Close that back up. I'll show you how these seats flip. So there's 2 mechanisms here. There's the seat back and the seat bottom. Pull one lever there to lift the seat bottom, and then this lever to drop it there. Same story on this side. Pull this, lift that, drop that. Pretty straightforward. Once you do that, you have a little over 500 litres worth of cargo capacity. Show you what that looks like. Laptop bag, suitcase, Bob's your uncle. Over to the side here, you've got hooks if you need to strap down anything. And then up the top, you've got hooks for shopping. And then finally, a 12-volt outlet stuck against the wall there. If you do drop the second row, the space expands to just under 1,500 litres. But I hear what you're asking. What happens to the bases? Do they just sit in the way of everything? No, there's a clever system. Let me show you how it works. Come around here. Similar to the way that you get into the third row, you fold this out of the way, but then this falls down. So that means you have a fairly flat boot floor if you need to load a whole bunch of things in. So we've hit the road in the Pajero Sport, but I wanted to give you a quick reminder, a friendly reminder, that we're not going to be doing any off-road driving and we're not going to be doing any towing with this car. All we're doing is giving you a detailed review of what it's like to drive day to day, where this is going to spend most of its time. The rest of those reviews will come down the track. Powering the Pajero Sport is a pretty familiar engine, but it's recently had some changes. There's an alloy head and a couple of other bits and pieces that have been modified to make it a little more efficient and lightweight. It's a 2.4 litre turbocharged diesel engine. It makes 133 kilowatts of power, 430 newton meters of torque, and it's mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission. The transmission does a pretty good job of handling the amount of torque in the car. It has a feature when you're going down a hill where it will start rolling back through the gears to provide you with engine braking. That's especially useful if you're towing, because it means you're not going to cook your brakes. And then if you do want to take over, there's these giant paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. You just whip those back a couple of times, it gives you a gear and away you go. This isn't really a sports car, but it is here for the purpose of being able to select those gears at any time. Despite its size, I mean, we're talking about a car here that weighs around 2,100 kilos. 8 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle. It is pretty impressive. With our testing, we've been doing a fair bit of driving. We're closer to that 10 litres per 100 mark, and if you whack a trailer on the back, it will go up as well. But it is quite efficient when you consider that you could have this full of passengers, full of luggage and heading away for the weekend and not spending a great deal of money on fuel. Now, how punchy is the engine? Let's give it a kick right now. Okay, 430 newton meters is okay. It's not going to pull the skin off your head, and it's nowhere near the 500 newton meters you're getting in stuff like the 2-litre Ford Everest, but it is okay for what it is. You can imagine if you had this full of passengers, or perhaps you were towing, it's probably going to be a little lackluster in terms of get up and go, and that is one of the big disadvantages with these ute-based SUVs. They use carryover engines, and often the engines are just enough for a ute, but not quite enough for a full complement in a wagon. And as a reminder, 3,100 kilogram braked towing capacity. Braked towing capacity means a trailer with brakes on it. If you don't have any brakes on the trailer, the maximum you can tow is 750 kilos. Let's talk ride comfort. Obviously, the Mitsubishi Triton, which this is based on, uses leaf springs at the rear. What they've done with the Pajero Sport is ripped out those leaf springs and put in a 3-link coil sprung setup instead. That gives you ultimate ride comfort, but it is probably a little too softly sprung. And where you're going to notice that is out on country roads as you hit bumps. It kind of feels like the body's here and then the wheels are just jiggling underneath it. There doesn't seem to be a great deal of feedback between the two. And it just kind of doesn't feel reassuring when you're behind the wheel. Yes, it is nice and soft and nowhere near as firm as something like a Toyota Fortuner, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it could be a little bit firmer just so the ride is more compliant. Turning circle comes in at 11.2 meters, reasonable for a car this size. And let's have a quick chat about the 4-wheel drive modes. Often with dual cab utes and SUVs that are based on utes, you can't use 4-wheel drive high range on a sealed surface. That's because it winds up the transmission and it doesn't do any good for it. This, on the other hand, is what Mitsubishi calls the Super Select 4-wheel drive system. So when you move it over into 4 high, you can do that at speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour, and you can drive on any surface in 4-wheel drive mode. So that means that if it is raining outside or you're on a gravel road and you want just a little bit more traction, you just flick that switch and you get the traction that you need. I think this is what sets this SUV apart from others in the segment. This type of technology is going to make you safer behind the wheel. You can then, of course, go to a 4 high with the center differential locked. This is the same mode that's used in other cars in this segment, and that's only on unsealed surfaces. And then finally, you can go into a low range mode, which is where you'll be able to get additional drive modes that adjust the way the throttle sensitivity feels behind the wheels. You've got like a gravel mode, a mud mode, snow mode. Really, they are just different variants of the same thing. All they do is adjust how much torque is going to each of those wheels. When it is in 4-wheel drive mode, it's sending 60% of torque to the rear and 40 to the front, but it can of course vary that with the traction control systems. You can switch all of that stuff off altogether, and you also have a rear differential lock that you can engage when you are in a 4-wheel drive mode. When you are flicking through these different modes, you get a display ahead of the driver here that shows you which axle is active and then which differential is locked as well. That's a good feature so you can remind yourself what you've left it in. In terms of visibility, I can see heaps out the front, including the edges of the bonnet, which means it's going to make parking easier. There are only rear parking sensors though. There aren't any front parking sensors. I would have liked to see that, just given how big this car is. Good size wing mirrors though, no blind spot monitoring. That's only for the top spec model. Visibility out the rear is also good, but if you do have third row occupants in there, it's going to be tricky to see out the back of the car. Finally, let's talk noise. And this is one noisy engine. It is suppressed somewhat inside the car, but from outside, it sounds like an old truck. It's very clattery and noisy. It doesn't really translate too much into the cabin, and there isn't a great deal of tyre noise, so from that point of view, it's good, but it would be nice if it was a little quieter. Okay, Mitsubishi Pajero Sport, what do we reckon? I really like this. It's one of my picks of this segment. You've got a third row there if you ever need to carry kids or occasionally adults. It is a little bit pokey, but you'd survive in there if you needed to do a short trip. You have enough room in the boot as well behind the third row as well if you need to put little bits and pieces in. It'll go anywhere. The all-wheel drive system in this car is excellent, and it also gives you the ability to drive in four-wheel drive mode on sealed surfaces, which you can't do in other cars in this segment. Sure, the back doesn't look that great, but the rest of the car is styled nicely. I'd recommend going for the Exceed, which is the top spec. It's only around $4,000 or $5,000 more than the GLS, and it comes with 7 seats. So once you pay for the 7 seats in the GLS, you're kind of getting close to it anyway. The engine's nice. It's only really let down by the suspension. It's probably just a little bit on the soft side, and it's undersprung. So that means when you are hitting those bumps, it doesn't really feel too confidence-inspiring underneath. But outside of that, it really is hard to pick a fault with the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the Pajero Sport. Have you bought one? Have you driven one? What do you think? If you found this review useful, I'd love it if you could press the like button and also subscribe to our channel. Press the bell icon while you're there. That tells you every single time we publish a new video. But until next time, take it easy.